Hi, my name is Scott Macmillan. I'm the Managing Director of Invictus Energy Ltd. We are listed on the Australian Securities Exchange. The ticker is IVZ. We're also listed on the OTCQB, and the ticker is IVCTF. Invictus Energy is an oil and gas exploration company. We're focused on Sub-Saharan Africa. We've got a very exciting asset in Zimbabwe in the Cabora Bassa Basin. Our license is Special Grant 4571. It contains the world-class Mukuyu prospect, independently estimated to contain 8.2 trillion cubic feet and 247 million barrels of condensate. We're leading into a very exciting drilling campaign coming up in June, July this year. We'll be drilling 2 wells, and will provide the ability for us to have material success, not only from an Invictus and a company point of view, but also potentially change the energy dynamics in the region.
Scott, thank you for the introduction. Nice to meet you. Goodness, a Zimbabwean oil and gas play. How exciting, how interesting, how exotic.
It is, and Zimbabwe hasn't been a sort of E&P heartland for a long time. And it's not because of the below ground potential. In fact, Mobil explored here 30 years ago and were very encouraged by what they saw, but thought it was more the petroleum system had more gas potential than oil potential, and they were looking for big oil targets. Now, if you cast your mind back 30 years ago, very limited gas market in in most parts of the world, to be honest, not just in Zimbabwe, coupled with a slump in the oil price in the mid-90s, and then some above ground challenges in Zimbabwe for the following 20 years, made it a very difficult place to explore because the investment environment wasn't conducive. But the government now has changed in late 2017, flung open the doors for foreign investment. We've been able to pick back up where Mobil left off, and they did leave behind a fantastic data set that we inherited. They spent $30 million in today's money, acquiring 2D seismic, gravity, aeromagnetic, and identified this big Mzarabani structure, which we've just recently renamed to Mukuyu. Material anticline, 200 square kilometers under closure, the largest undrilled structure that's seismically defined in onshore Africa. And so we've had a fantastic head start and been able to move into Zimbabwe and pick up a great asset, work that up. Last year, we completed our own infill seismic campaign to mature the drilling locations as well as identify any additional prospectivity. And so, we've been very successful over the last 4 years since we acquired the project in April 2018.
Thank you.
And now we're getting ready to drill.
Exciting. But before we get into the details of the drilling and kind of the granular detail of the project area, just stepping back a bit, onshore gas in sub-Saharan Africa. There's been Minati Bay and a few of the guys in Tanzania kind of were doing gas to power, weren't they? That's right. But there's nothing south of that until you get into South Africa. So there's a gap, is there? Or is there some gas to power in between those two?
You do. So you did mention Mnazi Bay, and that's Morrill Prom and Wentworth. You're involved in that. You've got Songa as well, which is Pan Africa. Mm-hmm. That's a little bit further to the north of, but also onshore Tanzania. Further south than that, in Mozambique, in the Mozambique basin, you've got Pandentamane, which is operated by Sasol, and that provides actually at the moment 100% of South Africa's gas supply. So South Africa is entirely dependent on onshore Mozambique for their gas supply. Yes, and those fields are quite mature and actually come off plateau either this year or next year. And so South Africa are really in a difficult spot now in terms of gas supply. And those fields were discovered in the late 50s, early 60s by Gulf. And part of the reason that Mobil didn't want to continue trying to discover more gas is because you had onshore fields in Mozambique that still hadn't been monetized at that point. So,
and that was 30 years ago, but now they're mature.
They are quite mature. They're in, they're sort of midlife assets now, Pandentamane and coming off plateau. Decent sized fields, roughly 4 TCF onshore. And that pipeline was built down to the Romco pipeline was built down to South Africa, 870 kilometers, and supplies all of South Africa's gas into the heart of that industrial complex in Gauteng and in Mpumalanga, where you've got some big energy consumers. that are addicted to cheap gas that's been supplied from Mozambique for decades, but is now watering. They've had some success further south, offshore in the Bredasdorp Basin with Petro SA that operated those fields. Those shut in at the end of last year, and just a little bit further south off the shelf in the deep water, you've had those quite
huge discoveries of kind of Cove Energy and all of that, and Total and all of that whole story.
That's right, but those face a long road to development because of the metocean conditions. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey for gas in Southern Africa, but it is now widely adopted, widely used. You've got gas to power in Mozambique as well, gas to power in Tanzania. That's been a savior for their economy, really, and their industrial base. They saved $4 billion in electricity costs from 2014 to 2017 because they're not burning heavy fuel oil. And so that's...
is there no gas off the Cape or on the Cape, or is that offshore? It was all offshore, wasn't it?
Those are all the offshore discoveries in the Bredasdorp Basin.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Is the geology the same? So the productive gas in Mozambique that's been going for 20, 30 years, is that the same geology as you've got in northern Zimbabwe? We've
got some of that geology. So those discoveries in Mozambique are in the Cretaceous. We've got two main plays. We've got the Karoo, which is the sort of widely chased Permo-Triassic play, although most of the focus has been on the Permian, particularly in the onshore in Southern Africa. We've got something quite different where we've got Triassic source rock, and that's one of the key differentiators and the reason that we really like the Cabora Bassa Basin. But also, and the Cabora Bassa Basin is very different compared to most of the basins in the region. What's also different about the Cabora Bassa Basin that we're exploring in is that you have a very significant amount of post-Karoo sediment. So that is Jurassic and Cretaceous as well. So we've got a post-Karoo play and as well as the Karoo play, which does differentiate itself and comes into its own depending on the depth and where you are in the different parts of the basin. So we do have some that's similar, but also we've got an older play that has been successful elsewhere. Renogen in onshore South Africa, their little methane play and helium play is from the Karoo. Recon Africa further to the west of us, that's also a Karoo age play, primarily Permian though.
I'm swimming around. It's been a number of years since I've done any kind of energy stuff in Africa. It's been 6 or 7 years, but essentially what you're saying is that you've got the source rock to provide the molecules. It's been cooked up to a stage where it's no longer in oil form, but it's trapped gas. And you've got multiple horizons, which are potentially the host rocks.
That's correct. So we've got, and again, one of the things that we really like about this basin is their stack potential. So there's multiple source rock sequences, there's multiple reservoirs, and the good thing is that with this huge anticline that in Mukuyu, it's a material structure 200 square kilometers under closure. So if any one of those comes in, it is company making stuff. The source rock question, though, going back to that, the source rock is capable of generating from the properties that we've identified. It does outcrop further to the west in the basin, so we've been able to sample that source rock directly, and we can track it back into the heart of our license area, which is the sort of windows that you want to be playing in from a depth perspective. And we can track it in with those seismic lines. And the source rock is capable of generating both oil and gas. But from a maturity point of view, we think, and depending on which source interval we're talking about, it's been into the oil window, generated oil, been through that and into the gas and condensate window. And then we've had some uplift and it's popped back up. So there's going to be multiple phases of generation. And we're probably going to have a mixture of both oil and gas in the basin that will come into play, because we've got multiple sequences.
But the total organic content of the source rock is sufficiently high for you to be confident that you've had that.
They're fantastic source fantastic source rocks.
And are they separate from any of the coal horizons, or is that a completely different question? I mean, because
they are entirely separate from the coal horizons. It's not one of the ones that we're focused on. That's in the lower Permian, which for most of the area that we're focused on in the fairway, that's over mature and cooked out basically, so that we haven't even bothered with that low Permian coal unit.
Okay, and again, I'm going to go back out even further away from the technical side, just to say you got a special grant and you've got an 80% holding in the license. Does that mean that the government has got to carry 20% interest?
No, so we have a local partner who has a 20% interest. So we farmed into special grant 4571 in 2018 and took an 80% stake in that. More recently, though, we did sign an agreement with the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Zimbabwe to combine two license areas that had been under application, both from ourselves, but also from the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And we have amalgamated that into now our license, Special Grant 4571. So it all falls under that license. So that license area has been expanded from 100,000 hectares to 709,300. So a sevenfold increase in the license area. And that's in exchange for then providing the Sovereign Wealth Fund a 10% back in right to our license post final investment decision for any discovery that's made.
And I see that one of your directors sits on the presidential kind of advisory council. It's very close to the president of the country. Is that a kind of a? Can you describe that kind of link? How do you phrase that?
Sure. So we've been very, very deliberate in how we've gone about, our strategy and our entry into Zimbabwe. Probably the reason, just stepping back even further, one of the reasons that we are there is because I'm Zimbabwean, my family's, is still there. So we've got access to opportunities and the knowledge of how to do business there that other companies just simply don't. With my background in oil and gas, I'm a reservoir engineer and worked in Australia and in the oil patch for a long time. So we had a unique advantage in that respect. But also knowing how to do business, we've brought along and brought a deliberate strategy in how we go about in advancing our exploration program and our project. The director that you're referring to, Joe Matizwa, is a very renowned businessman in Zimbabwe. He is one of the most respected corporate leaders. He ran Delta Corporation, the largest listed company in Zimbabwe, for a long time until he retired. And he actually came about because he sits as chairman of an institutional fund in Zimbabwe that invested into Invictus, and we brought him onto the board from there. But when the government changed in 2017, one of the things that they did, trying to bring back international investment into Zimbabwe, is go and put together an advisory council to advise the government on, this is what private enterprise is looking for, and to provide that sounding board to make sure that the policies that were being formulated were sound and were going to have the desired effects. And so Joe sits on that presidential advisory council, and because he's so well respected. He also sat on the Reserve Bank board until the end of 2019 or something. So very, very well known business identity in Zimbabwe, and that's helped us navigate, particularly during COVID when travel was restricted. He was our director on the ground, and he helped us get a huge amount done. So it has been key in having great local talent and local knowledge and expertise to help advance the project. And the same goes for our local partner as well, who's been key in us getting our social license to operate, both with the community that we're working with on the ground very closely with, and also in government circles. So we've operated very differently to how oil companies typically do, where you have quite an antagonistic relationship between operator and non-operator partners. This has been a very collaborative effort, and it's paid dividends for us.
It's funny. I do see a difference between the way the oil companies and the mineral companies operate, because the oil companies so often just they come in for a short seismic program and they leave again, and it's very much fly in, fly out. Whereas the mineral exploration guys typically have to live and breathe and interact with the local communities on a constant basis. So there is that cultural shift or distinction between the two types of companies. But it's good to hear that you're more local, and I'd expect that from someone who understands Zimbabwe.
Yeah, and I think we've done that very successfully, and we've brought everyone along on the journey with us. We've had great support from the communities, from government, and that's really helped us progress this project quite quickly. From when we picked it up 4 years ago, when we first made the acquisition, to drilling and shooting a seismic campaign, being interrupted by for effectively 18 months with COVID, and advancing to a 2-well campaign within 4 years is pretty swift going, and that's because of the way that we've managed it and had the support of everyone involved. So we're very pleased at how it's gone.
I'm still slightly unclear exactly where it is in Zimbabwe. I've traveled a bit around Zimbabwe over the years. I've driven northeast, south, and west, but I'd like to see on a map if you could.
Sure, let me just pull one up for you.
I've been on some legendary bus trips with a lot of beer drunk.
It is a great place to travel.
Yeah.
So if you can see my screen here.
Yes, I can.
We're up in the north of Zimbabwe, so near the junction of the Mozambique border, and then also the Zambian border, where my cursor is here, just in the northwest. So this red polygon is our original license area,
and the green is the extended.
The green is the extended license area, and to the south of this is Harare. So you can see Harare there where my cursor is, and
where does the Zambezi flow? So that flows kind of.
The Zambezi flows along the top through here, and then further west, and then goes into Lake Cabora Bassa in Mozambique, which is what the basin is named after.
Okay, and so you're on the southern edge of Lake Cabora Bassa.
We're
south of rather.
We're south of. We're probably in the heart of our license area. We're probably a good 80 kilometers away from the southern shore of Lake Cabora Bassa.
Your prospective resource, 9 TCF of gas and just under 300 million barrels of condensate. Who signed off on that? And what was the work that was involved to kind of come up with that exploration target or that prospective resource?
Sure. So the 9 TCF and 300 million barrels of condensate is across 2 prospects. So Masasa, which is roughly 1 TCF and 50 million barrels of condensate. That's over 3 stacked targets. And then we've got Mzarabani or Mukuyu, as it's been renamed. That's 8.2 TCF and just shy of 250 million barrels of condensate across 5 stacked targets. Those are independent numbers. Those aren't our internal numbers, although they're very close. And again, being a junior company, it's always been very important for us, and we knew because this target is so big. I mean, it's 200 square kilometers under closure across, and we've got closure at multiple horizons. It is very, very big, and a structure like this, if it had been anywhere else in the world, would have been drilled by now, but it hasn't because it's been locked away because of the above ground. We had 2 independent assessments done. One, the first one was done by Netherlands Sewell & Associates, so they're equivalent of a Big 4 accounting firm, but for petroleum reserves and resources estimates. And then we also had GTEC, who are a UK listed firm, and they did a big integrated study for us, including the gravity and magnetics, because the seismic grid that Mobil had was so widely spaced. We integrated as much data as we could to help progress it. And so those numbers that you see are from GTEC, but all of the estimates from ourselves, Netherlands Sewell & Associates, and GTEC are all very, very similar.
And you've done quite a lot of infill seismic. Do these estimates, they predate that seismic work?
That's right. So we've got an exercise going on at the moment to update our prospective resources base one from the new seismic, but also across the wider license area now that that's been expanded as well. So that's quite an intensive exercise, given what we've seen from the seismic campaign, both from the amount of data that we've gathered, but also what we've identified in that wider license area as well. So that's work that's in progress at the moment.
Was it vibrosize? I mean, did you have the trucks going out, or did you use kind of passive seismic? Or
no, we had vibrosize, and we did before we undertook the exercise, we did quite a lot of modeling work on what would work best based on what we were trying to target, and vibrosize was the clear winner. So that campaign was conducted last year by Polaris, a Canadian company who did a very good job. We acquired 840 line kilometers, which is quite a big survey. And that was done and completed in November last year, and was processed, and the interpretation we've just completed. So that's why that prospective resources estimate is work in progress at the moment. You
published the interpretation of your seismic just a couple of weeks ago, didn't you?
Yeah. So we put out an update of what we've seen in the current license area. So that is with just on the Mukuyu structure. Do you want
to pull up some slides? We can talk through some of those images that because there's a whole bunch of images that came out of that news release, probably incorporated in your slide deck.
So what I'll show you first is what we saw in the before we shot our seismic, and then take you through what we've seen after that. So you can see these faint black lines here, which are the previous mobile seismic survey. So they shot a sort of reconnaissance type scale survey. And these lines are spaced roughly 15 to 20 kilometers apart, so very, very wide. And this big Mzarabani or Mukuyu prospect that we can see through here, we can see all of these different horizons. The main one in the upper Angua, which is this yellow shaded horizon through here, is this red outline. And then we've got all of these other targets through there. So we can hit all of these targets with one well. And then we've got the smaller Masasa prospect here in the east. And then we had this lead A through here, which we could just tag on this line, this old line 13 and line 7 through here on these old mobile lines. So the basis of going and shooting that infill was to refine the location to drill this huge prospect in through here, but also because of the spacing in this mobile survey, given the typical trap density, we also expected to see quite a lot more with infill data. So we shot.
Sorry, could you just go back? That on the left-hand slide, is that a seconds down? Is that a time stamp on the left-hand side?
That is time. That's correct.
Okay. So it's not depth.
So this top horizon through here equates to roughly 2,700 meters below surface level at this top yellow horizon through here.
And when you mentioned the lead A, how is that represented on the section?
So this is the sliver through here, and it is I think this yellow horizon in through here.
And what's
it'll become clearer, and I'll show you what it's developed into now.
Okay.
With the new seismic.
Okay, and just another question. Sorry, going back.
No problem.
It looks as if so you're saying this is the data that was given to you, although you inherited.
So mobile, mobile left behind the field tapes, and we reprocessed them.
But those two lines, the north-south lines that they shot. Oh, there is one right through the middle, underneath under. Okay, I was wondering how you got the cross section without a line, but there is a line underneath that. I couldn't see it.
There is a line. Yeah. So this is line. I'm a bit heavy-handed on the dotted line through that north-south section.
No problem.
So we had the survey, which was a great basis for us, because going into a frontier basin to having to shoot this is a big endeavor. Not knowing where to start, and you're going to have to go and shoot infill, and that was mobile's kind of next step. So we then did that, and you can see those old mobile lines in green through here, and these new lines that we've infilled with. So that has reduced that infill spacing to roughly 1.7 kilometers apart. And we also shot it in what's called a swath method. So we were listening on the adjacent lines and shooting on these lines. So we've got a kind of intermediate product as well, which has been quite useful. We've got a fantastic documentary on our website on the campaign, which you can go and have a look at. It's about 10 minutes long and just shows you the kind of environment that we're operating in down there and how it all went.
And you pretty much covered the full anticline, the four-way closure. That's
right. So this is the sort of big anticline through here, but there's a whole basement high trend, through the central fault here that is coincident with this, and has been some kind of compressional event, which we can see all the way east, west through east through here. So we've gone and filled in, and that's roughly where the Mukuyu, that big anticline that you saw previously sits, and then we've got what we've termed the sort of basin margin area through here, and then we've got some other interest through here. So we've gone and
you can see the basin bounding fault just crystal clear there with the kind of the basin, the mountains to the south, and then the sediments, the plateau to the north. It's extraordinary.
That's right. So it's flat on the valley floor here, and your change in elevation from the very west of where the seismic survey is to the east here is roughly 40 meters. It's quite extraordinary, right. And you can actually see the shoulders of the valley in the background here in this picture. It's quite extraordinary. So with that, and then if you just keep in mind, this is the line 10 from the new survey and line 13 from the old survey from mobile days. We had them processed concurrently as well. So we processed the mobile data set again so that we had a common contractor and common parameters. So we started to see some very interesting results from this is the fast track data that we got just after the survey was completed, where in this shallower horizon through here, we saw these bright amplitudes through here that these are faults cutting through here. So they switch off at the fault. We can see some possible gas chimneys through here. But also what's been encouraging are these flat spots that we can see through here, which may be, indicative of hydrocarbon contacts. And then these bright burning amplitudes as well against the basin bounding fault through here. So we've got multiple trapping configurations and some exciting.
Just for the layperson. So when you're talking about a flat spot, essentially what you do is you can see from the seismic that you've got the geology, the strata has got a dip to it, which you can point out there. You can see that on the map. But then underneath that, where the oil and the gas contact or the might be, because that'll always be horizontal, that will create a flat spot which is at an angle to the overlying strata. And can you just kind of describe what the features in a hydrocarbon saturated host? What creates the amplitude and amplitude? Why do you get the bright spots?
Sure. So with seismic, what that does is measure the time that it takes for those sound waves that you generate to travel through the various layers of the earth, and through different types of rock. If you imagine, let's take a very simple example: a layer cake, where you've got multiple layers of cake. Some of it very thick chocolate mud cake, maybe some of it some vanilla sponge. I'm not a cake aficionado, but maybe some Black Forest cake, maybe something else. That sound will travel through those different layers at different speeds. If you then fill those pores within that cake with a different fluid than what's usually contained in them, which is water or brine, where that'll fill up to an interface, and then you'll find some equilibrium where it'll level off. When those sound waves travel through those different layers and then hit a different interface, because you've got that interface, it's going to travel through hydrocarbon saturated layers at the same speed, but as soon as it hits the same layer, but filled with a different fluid, that's where you're going to get that change in and where that interface is and that change in character. So that's what we're potentially seeing here, which makes it quite exciting.
And the fact that you can see the faults in the structure, but the bright spots to the down dip side makes you confident, or increases your confidence that there's been no leakage along that fault.
It does, and we see some potential leakages through here, and none of these faults are going to be perfectly sealing. But up against here, and I'll take you through some more recent work that we just released, which is really encouraging. So this is what we saw early on in sort of November, just after we shot the survey, and then the processing took place. So this, if you cast your mind back to where I showed you lead A from the previous mobile survey, this was this was line 13 through here, this faint one through here, and then line 7 on the old survey, which was I think this one through here. Now we could see basically this, and if you remember, it was a sort of wedge shape like that.
Yeah.
But those are the only two lines that we saw it on. And what it has now turned out to be is something that is quite pretty large and pretty encouraging in terms of its aerial size. So it's turned into this orange shaded area through here, because we've infilled with all of these seismic lines in between those two, and we've been able to confidently map it. So we could see it with this. We had another, and also we've shot not only dip lines, but these strike lines as well through here. Whereas previously the old mobile ones, there was only 2 strike lines. There's one further north from here, but that was it. So we couldn't really track this feature all the way around to the north here, but we can now with this new survey. Not only that, but we've seen these amplitudes and these, if you remember back to the previous slide, we could see those cross-cutting, those moving across the faults, and we can see that here. But they also shut off at roughly the same two-way time, both on the strike and the dip lines through here. So you can see that clear anticline that's part of that same greater structure through here. And we've got termination both at this northern point here and across this across the southern part of that dip line, but also across the strike line where it's switching off. So that's really encouraging from an amplitude perspective. Then taking an extraction of that amplitude, which is this next slide that I'm showing you here, which is the gradient. So the gradient is often used as a direct hydrocarbon indicator and can indicate fluid fill as well. So taking an extraction.
Sorry, I'm showing my ignorance here. The gradient is that the rate of change of what's the gradient representing? Is it the rate of change of the signal coming back?
Yeah, in layman's terms, that's roughly right. I'm not a geophysicist. I'm a reservoir engineer, and so. But
you can basically
take your rate of change across this window that we've done here, and that's what it creates.
It'll create a differential, and so bring out the high spots.
That's correct. So extracting that and showing this gradient map, it also then conforms to structuring where we've picked and where we can see that switching off. So if you track using this green contour on the southern flank of the structure, which is nice and quiet, we do have quite a lot of faulting on the northern side of this major east-west fault through here. But that gradient tracks really well all the way through the southern side. We get to this fault through here, it switches off. And then if we follow it all the way back, it then comes back in the north. Now, if you also think back, and it is quite complicated in this northern section, and perhaps because it's more faulted, we're seeing more, potentially more of a leak in that side. So looking at, if you go back to this, some of this fast track data, this is on the southern side, and this quieter flank that we see through here. We don't see any of those gas chimneys on the southern side through here, but as we go through that center of the structure where it gets a little more broken up and a little bit more faulted, we start to see some of those gas chimneys. So perhaps we're looking at different contacts, from the southern side to the northern side. But, this is a very, very encouraging sign that we see this amplitude conformance to structure. We see them switching off the same two-way time. So we've been thrilled with the results that we've seen from the seismic campaign that we gathered, and there's more to come now with once that new license area is gazetted, we can release the results of what we've seen in the remaining license area, which is quite exciting. So
the new ground is outside of this area,
outside of our original area, but we did get permission last year to shoot outside of that area, so we've already covered. We've already covered a lot of it, and that's why we've elected to go forward with a 2-well campaign. So we're going to drill Mukuyu, and it'll be drilled on this, on the southern side of the structure through here. So this is just the first target in a series of stacked targets that we'll be drilling for the structure. So, I mean, this is a great first up target for us. It's relatively shallow, sort of 900 meters at this location to top structure. Quite a lot of closure through here. This green contour down here is 1,200 meters, so we've got a lot to play in, and it'll prove out quite a lot of volume just on the southern flank. And then we've got another, 4 or 5 targets beneath this as well that can provide us with some material success.
The thickest section, though, your biggest kind of reservoir potential was the deeper target, though, the one that you pointed out was at around 2,700 meters depth.
Oh,
was that the Awunga or the Ayunga?
The Angwa, yeah. So
Angwa.
So that is in the deeper section, and I'll show that to you now. And that is, so there's primary targets. There's some stuff that we must investigate, and we're looking at that here at the sort of 500. This 500 horizon where we think it's Pebbly Arcos or Upper Angwa, and we can see this nice flat spot through here. That A target is the one we just went through in that sort of post-Dandy level. It's quite shallow, and then we'll start to deviate the well to track down the backside of the faults of that structure that we saw in that earlier seismic section. And then in the 600 as well, we've got a little bit deeper. This is getting down towards sort of 3,000 meters or so. That we've got some other targets too.
When you've got a big target like this, and there are numbers of 8 TCF, 9 TCF. There's a huge numbers, but when you drill one upper target, you're not going to find 9 TCF in that first target. 9 TCF is spread over the entire license area. So what constitutes a commercial discovery in your mind? I mean, it may be too early to say, but you must have an idea whether it's a few 100 million barrels of oil or equivalent, or TCF or BCF.
Yeah. So there's 2 parts to that. One, what are you going to do if you discover multi TCF? And the question is how you're going to commercialize it, and we can get into that. Shortly. But from a minimum sort of economic field size that we're looking at, you're probably looking at roughly 300 or 400 BCF to have a commercial development on your hands. And going back to your earlier example of Mnazi Bay in Tanzania, that's a really good example. That's roughly 400 BCF. It's about 400 k's from Dar es Salaam, where the pipeline runs to, and it delivers feedstock for gas to power and industrial customers. So we've got and that was done at sort of lower prices than what you can fetch nowadays. So anywhere around that sort of mark will be off to the races from a development point of view. From a multi TCF discovery point of view, champagne problems, as I like to call them.
Yeah.
And that's always the question that we get asked. You're landlocked. How are you going to develop this? Where are your markets? And it's something that's been quite overlooked, and the potential hasn't really been realized by industry, by anyone really. But again, because of our local knowledge, because we understand the environment there's a huge number of ways to monetize it. So Firstly, we've already got a gas cell MOU with Sable Chemicals, who are a fertilizer manufacturer in Zimbabwe. They've been around since 1966. They used to produce ammonia by electrolysis, the original, green hydrogen company on the planet. That was a 100 megawatt electrolysis facility, the largest one in the world, but that shut down in 2014 because of the lack of electricity and the expense of it. So they now import gas by rail from South Africa. And so they came to us and said, look, we understand it's exploration, but we want to be at the front of the queue if you make a discovery. So
that's a good route if you've got an MO, if you've got a kind of a minimum economic size.
Yeah,
they could help that kind of first kind of commercialization step.
That'll underpin it straight away. It's for a substantial volume, 70 million cubic feet a day over 20 years, which is about what Mnazi Bay is now from a full field development perspective. It started off at 20 and grew to 70 or 80 or what it is today. From a gas to power perspective, that's a huge market in Southern Africa. Power shortages there are well documented, both in Zimbabwe and South Africa. But I think one of the distinct differences and key advantages of that part of the world is you've got the Southern Africa power pool, which connects the grid from Cape Town all the way through to the Congo. You've got cross-border electricity trading that already happens and is run out of Harare. And so that will enable us to generate power and export it, anywhere through the grid. And again, you've got the deregulation of the generation and distribution sectors, both in Zimbabwe and South Africa at the moment. So you're able to sell directly to your customers, not through a state-owned power utility, which is, again, what's held up a lot of new gas to power developments because of the challenges they've had in places like West Africa, where that was the case, and the state-owned power didn't pay for it, and everyone ended up in a mess. So it is a very, very different scenario. And then we've got the ability to tap into that ROMCO pipeline that I mentioned earlier in Mozambique and deliver gas and large scales or large volumes of gas into the South African domestic market.
And what are the prices at the moment? As I said, it's been years since I looked at onshore gas in Africa, but that there were two basic challenges when I was looking at those companies. One was price, and other was time. Things just took so long.
Yeah. So on the price side of things, for wholesale prices of gas in South Africa, you're looking at anywhere between $8 and $10 at the moment. So, very attractive from that perspective. Renogen, who are developing a power gas to power project there and a domestic gas business in South Africa, have sold gas recently at $14. So, you're looking at very, very healthy pricing from a South African market perspective. Probably a little bit lower in Zimbabwe, given it's landlocked. But we've got pricing that certainly works for us. It works with Sable. It's probably will be the most competitive feedstock from a power generation perspective going around. And then from a time perspective, again, one of the things that we've been very deliberate in what we've done and how we've gone about everything is to make sure that we have all of the provisions necessary to get to fast track a development built into our agreements with government. So access to pipeline easements, all of the approvals that are required, all of that's pre-baked in, so that if we are successful, we can get after a development straight away and not have to worry about it. But and on the pipeline side, we've already got the Harare to Beira liquid pipeline that runs, and it has got a cross-border arrangement. So that takes care of the majority of your easement route to South Africa. We've got the Southern Africa Power Pool electricity pylons and those big easements for those the power grid that carries power all over the region. Those are perfect to run pipelines down. So again, you don't have landowner compensation issues. You don't have environmental issues, because all of those are already pre-done. So it's a lot less challenging than at first first glance.
Well done. That sounds good. So really, what we're talking about now is the countdown to drilling, and then the countdown to I mean, this is it. This is the big moment. You're standing at the back of the orchestra with your cymbals. This time you're going to.
It is. It's been a long time coming, and I think really pleasing to have got here from when we started out with this project. We were a very small company. We still are, but we're a lot bigger than we used to be. We took destiny into our own hands with soul funding the seismic, plotting our own path. We've now that we've completed the seismic managed to attract a number of industry participants to the opportunity, and we're running a farm out process at the moment, and that's gone very well and been well endorsed from that perspective. And now we're leading into the drilling phase, and we're going to find out whether we've got commercial accumulations of oil and gas in the basin, and whether we're going to change the region from an energy perspective for the better. For a long time, it could have huge implications. So that's pretty exciting.
Are you looking to not go into the well on a 100% basis?
So we've got 80%, but we're funding 100% with a carry for our local partner. Look, we're in quite a unique position as a company, because we've got very supportive shareholders. We've got a cheap onshore project in terms of drilling costs. To give you some contrast, Brulpadda, which was one of the discoveries that Total made off the coast of South Africa, deep water, hostile ocean conditions, a few 100 million barrels of condensate. So similar size to Mukuyu. They tried to drill that in 2014, and that was $150 million escapade, which they couldn't complete because the mid-ocean conditions were too rough. They came back with an upspec rig in 2018 and re-drilled it for $200 million, and then made that discovery. We can chase something that's same size or bigger, for $15 million. And so the risk reward and the scale of what we're chasing is something very, very rare. And I think now with our expanded license here as well, we've got the running room, our market cap, and our support that we've had from the shareholders has enabled us, with the option to go and soul fund this. We went out to raise money for the seismic campaign this time last year. And seismic is often the hardest thing to raise money for, because in the market's eyes, it's not very sexy. It's quite a long dated process. And even if you conclude it successfully, there's no real catalyst with the seismic campaign. You don't have that, kind of definitive answer. And we went out for 6 to 8 million, and we got bids for 33 million in 3 hours, and and shut the books. And so coming into the drilling campaign, we've got people screaming at us to fund it. And so we're in a really lucky position. If you'd asked me when we started this in 2018 or pre-COVID, we were in a very, very different position as a company. So we're thrilled that we can choose either route, either by bringing in a partner to take some of the risk and some of the funding off the table, or now we've seen some very interesting seismic results now that interp is finished, and we're in a good position. So really, really pleased.
Well, congratulations. I worked for a fund that was a significant shareholder in Cove Energy. We saw that come right.
A huge inflection, yeah.
Yeah. And so this is the time. Great. Well, all I can say is good luck, and I'll keep watching the space. It'll be very interesting to see whether you do go for a farm out. I guess that'll depend on the quality of the offer that you receive, and then the ultimate proof of the pudding will be when that hole first of all spuds in June or July, and then probably get down to first target in a couple of months. Is that? Well,
no, it'll be a little bit quicker, because you've got that new shallow target that we've identified. So that's only 900 meters. That'll be done in from spud. Probably looking at 2 weeks. Till that's from spud till that's we find out what's causing those amplitude anomalies.
Well, you're in the southern hemisphere, so hopefully it won't be a winter of discontent. This will be a winter of content.
No, look, it's pretty pleasant down in the valley that time of year. So there won't be any discontent from a weather perspective. But let's hope we get the result that we've been chasing with the drilling.
Well, Scott, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thanks for having me, Merlin.